Hello, beautiful people of the internet. How are you doing today? My name is Jackie and welcome back to my YouTube channel. This is going to be the start of another writing related video. In this video, I am going to be trying writing tips from famous authors. This is a video idea that I've had for quite a while and I'm excited to finally try it out for myself. As you know, if you've watched my previous novel writing vlogs, I am currently working on the first draft of a historical mystery novel I have nicknamed Project Mayfair. It's been about 2 weeks since I last had the opportunity to work on this draft, so I'm excited to get back into it by implementing some of these writing tips. Now, I basically Googled around and read several different articles, including writing advice from various authors. The advice that I picked, I wanted to choose writing tips that I felt like I could actually implement in my life, and I wanted more so specific tips about the act of writing or what to do while writing, because I didn't want to just, pick a generic piece of advice like, oh, write what you know, or things like that. It had to be something that was actually applicable to my situation and that I felt like I could also use in a vlog format. I don't know if I explained that well at all, but hopefully you understand what I'm trying to say. I wanted to find advice that I felt like I could actually implement both into my life and also into a vlog in a way that is concise and hopefully useful. So here is the advice I'm going to try to implement in this video. Now, I did not pick my favorite authors necessarily. I really determined what to include in this video based on the advice itself, not who said it. So, the first tip, this is from John Steinbeck, the author of Mice and Men. He says, if you're using dialogue, say it aloud as you write it. Only then will it have the sound of speech. This is something I definitely think I could do. I've mentioned in these vlogs before that actually sometimes when I'm writing, I dictate to my phone, which is kind of the same thing as saying the dialogue aloud. And this is just a very common piece of writing advice. I think I can definitely do this. It is a little bit awkward to read aloud. It feels kind of like you're talking to yourself, but I think it could definitely help the finished product. Similarly, here's a piece of advice from Mark Haddon, the author of The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime. He says, read your work out loud, preferably to other people. Things that work or don't work are sometimes invisible on paper, but obvious when heard. This makes sense. Again, I think it's very awkward to read your own work aloud to people, so I'll have to get over that a little bit. I'm sure my mom would be happy if I read some of it to her. Maybe I'll even read a paragraph or something to you all on the internet. You can tell me how you think it sounds. I don't know. Thirdly, here's a piece of advice from Maggie O'Farrell, the author of Hamnet and the Marriage Portrait. She said, if you have trouble switching from your real world to your fictional one, try listening to the same piece of music over and over again until whatever surrounds you fades away. I will probably try this tip first because, like I said, I have not worked on my novel in about 2 weeks, and I am definitely having a hard time getting back into the right headspace because I've taken 2 weeks away from the project. Maybe this will help me get back into the writing mood and just forget my real world thoughts, issues, concerns, and immerse myself back into the fictional world. Now, I also picked a piece of writing advice from Stephen King. I found a lot of his advice on the internet, but this one I figured would be pretty easy to try out, and I thought it was a little different from the other tips I picked out. Stephen King says that you should avoid adverbs, especially after he said and she said. Now, I think you don't need to be super Spartan and delete all adverbs or words like just or very, because let's be honest, people sometimes say those things, and if it never appeared in your manuscript, it would seem, in my opinion, a little weird. However, I thought maybe I could search through what I've written so far for he said or she said and see how often I'm using adverbs in that context. I do think sometimes I use them a bit too much, but I don't want to delete all of them entirely because in my opinion, that wouldn't seem authentic. But you definitely can delete some of them. And if you're saying something like, for instance, she said softly, you could just change that to she whispered or she murmured and have the exact same meaning, but with a stronger word. Finally, I have a piece of advice that I'm going to be incorporating throughout this vlog. This is a quote from Ernest Hemingway, where he said, "The best way to write, I guess, is always stop when you are going good and when you know what will happen next. If you do that every day while you are writing a novel, then you will never be stuck." This advice also makes sense to me. Another piece of advice that I've heard, I don't remember who originally said this, is that if you want to make it easier to pick up in your draft the next time you sit down to write, stop writing in the middle of a sentence. Because if you do that, you'll have a very easy place to start. You'll know how you wanted to finish that sentence, and then you don't have to spend time sitting there being like, oh, where do I start? Because you've already left yourself a natural starting point. This advice makes sense to me. So these are the writing tips I'm going to try out in this video. We'll see how it goes. I'll let you know if I think the advice is successful. And also, let's recognize that what works for some writers is not going to work for others. Everyone has their own personal methods and approach. Things that I like or that these authors like, they may not work for you. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's bad advice. Hello. So, in accordance with Stephen King's writing tip, I went through draft 1 of my work in progress and I searched for every instance of the phrase he said, thinking also she said would also pop up when I typed that in, and this is what I found. I used the phrase he said 122 times throughout the draft so far. Now, how many of those times did I use an adverb? Surprisingly, only 14 times. So that is really not too bad, but every time I saw there was an adverb there, I looked at the context to decide if the adverb was really necessary. I also have, for you, a complete breakdown of all of the times I used an adverb. Also, I just realized I think it's actually not 14. I think it's 15. And I just can't count. I had one instance of said slowly, one instance of said slowly and clearly, which I changed to enunciated. I think based on the context, that would work perfectly fine, and that's just a more specific word for said that conveys the same meaning. I had one instance of said quietly, which I just decided to keep. Every other time I wanted to refer to somebody speaking quietly, I just used the phrase whispered or mumbled or something like that, but I figured this one instance was fine. I had one said smoothly, as well as one said dryly, which I changed to quipped. There was also one said politely, one said coolly, one said sarcastically, and one said honestly. However, clearly my favorite adverb to use with the word said is calmly, because I used the phrase he or she said calmly 5 times, but I did change some of those. One of them I just deleted because I determined that the dialogue tag wasn't even really necessary in that instance. One I changed to entreated, and another one I think I just said he said. I just deleted the calmly and kept said. So now, instead of 5, I only have 2 instances of the phrase said calmly. All in all, though, I think this is pretty good. I mean, I don't want to be as strict as saying never use an adverb, because if adverbs were always wrong, then they wouldn't exist in the English language. I've seen some videos on YouTube where people, when they are giving you tips about how to edit, tell you to delete all of these words. I don't think that's really necessary. Like, the reader is not going to be sitting there keeping a running tally of your adverbs. As long as you don't abuse them, I think they are fine. Sometimes you definitely can use a stronger word that conveys the same meaning, such as when I changed it to enunciated, because the definition of enunciate is literally to speak clearly. However, do not be afraid of the word said. There are some people who think that said is a bad word and that they need to think of more creative words and never use said. However, if you're using all these other words and never saying said, the reader is definitely going to notice, because it's just going to sound like you are thumbing through a thesaurus, and it's really going to take the reader out of the story. There is nothing wrong with said. Really, it's all about balance and just using your best judgment. I think this first writing tip was a pretty good one. This was definitely an interesting exercise. And I think I've also realized that I don't use adverbs as much as I thought I did. I was really worried that I used too many, but I'm pretty happy with this. I mean, with the changes that I made, the remaining adverbs make up less than 10% of all dialogue tags. I think that's pretty good. Hello everyone. So I'm hoping to get some more writing done this afternoon, and I think I am now going to try Maggie O'Farrell's tip about listening to the same music over and over to forget your real world problems and immerse yourself in the fictional world. Now, I wasn't really sure what music I should listen to on repeat, because usually I just listen to pop music, but I don't think this exercise would really work if I was listening to something with lyrics, because when I'm listening to a song with lyrics, I am 100% thinking about the song and the lyrics that I'm hearing, so I don't think that would really help clear my mind. So I'm going to try listening to some instrumental music, and I don't usually listen to that kind of music, but I thought perhaps I could listen to the 2005 Pride and Prejudice soundtrack. First of all, it's just a beautiful soundtrack. Two, I think it is kind of relevant to what I'm writing, and since there's no lyrics, I think maybe I'll just be able to calm myself down and clear my mind a little more. I don't know if this is going to work for me, but I'm gonna give it a try. And even if this tip doesn't work for me, it doesn't mean it won't necessarily work for you if you try it. I think I am just not very good at clearing my mind. I always have too many thoughts running through my head at any given time. I'm not good at meditating. I think it's just gonna be a little difficult for me to just completely forget my real world problems and go entirely to the fictional world, but I guess I'll just, lie down, close my eyes, listen to the music, and try to think about what I want to accomplish today in terms of writing. Okay, to be completely honest with you, that tip worked a lot better than I thought it would. It really helped me just focus on what I wanted to write. I just laid down, listened to the music in the background, and thought about my story. I guess it kind of had a similar effect to a lot of times when I'm lying in bed at night trying to fall asleep, I find myself thinking about writing, and so I think it had a very similar effect to that. When you just lay down and don't really have to think about anything else, the thoughts come a lot easier. So before I was even done with one listen through the album, I was ready to go start writing another chapter. All in all, that was a pretty good tip, so thanks, Maggie O'Farrell. I also did stop in the middle of the chapter to kind of try to follow the Ernest Hemingway tip about how you should stop writing when you know what's going to happen next. And I do think that's a good tip. It makes it a lot easier to start again. But I don't know if I personally like doing this. I very much like to have a chapter finished and then just take a break with that sense of accomplishment. So I do think it's a good tip. I just don't know if it's something that I'm going to do in my real life. Hello all! So I am here to finish up this video on trying famous authors' writing tips. I just finished writing another chapter, and I did try to use Steinbeck's and Mark Haddon's tips in a slightly modified way. Like I said, I already do a lot of dictation when writing, and I think that does help get the dialogue right and makes it feel more authentic, like John Steinbeck said. Now, Mark Haddon's tip about reading what you wrote out loud, preferably to someone. Like I said, I feel a little bit awkward about that, and I didn't really know how that was going to work. I did think about reading it to some of you guys, reading it in the vlog, but like, that wouldn't really work because I'm writing the last third of my novel and it would be super spoilery, so I can't really read you guys an entire chapter. That just wouldn't work. But what I ended up doing, and I found this very, very helpful, is after I finished writing the chapter, I used one of those text-to-speech converters on the internet, and I had the automated voice read my chapter back to me. At times, it was unintentionally funny because the voice would just say things wrong. For instance, if you write no, period, it thinks you meant number, which is not the same thing. But all in all, I found this very, very helpful because sometimes when I write a scene, I worry that it's not quite right. I worry maybe it's not descriptive enough. Maybe it has too much description, this, that, and the other thing. But listening to this voice read it back to me, I was like, oh no, this chapter is perfectly good. Like, the things that I was worried about, no, they work fine. Honestly, that's something that I see myself continuing to do because I think listening to the chapter I just wrote really put things into perspective, and it helped me recognize that I was being a little bit too hard on myself and worrying too much. When somebody was able to read the chapter to me, even if it was just an automated voice, it did help me understand, yeah, no, this actually is working. Now, for the Ernest Hemingway tip about stop writing when it's going well and you know what's going to happen next. I do think this is a good tip. I think there's a lot of benefits to doing this. However, I don't know if it's something that I personally can do. Once I get into the groove and I'm really feeling a scene, I just want to keep writing it and I want to finish it. I also don't always have time to write my novel during the week because I work a 9-to-5 job where I am writing all day long, and so sometimes I really can't work on my novel that much. And I do think I like to be able on the weekends to finish an entire chapter or 2 or maybe even 3 and have that sense of completion and accomplishment. So I don't know if I'm necessarily going to be implementing this Hemingway tip in my real life, though I do think there is merit to it. Perhaps I could try to just start the first sentence of the next chapter to give myself something for next week. I don't know. I do think this tip definitely is a good one, and it's similar to previous writing advice I've heard, but I just don't know if it's something that works for me personally. I really like that sense of accomplishment I get after finishing an entire chapter and knowing, okay, I wrote this chapter, the draft is done, I accomplished something today. All in all, though, I think this was a pretty successful vlog, and all of these tips worked really well. If you are still here watching this video, let me know in the comment section what is the best piece of writing advice you've ever received, and if you don't have one, then how about you just comment a red heart emoji. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, make sure to give it a big thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more from me. I post new videos every Wednesday and Sunday. My social media links are down below if you want to follow me on Tumblr, Instagram, or be my friend on Goodreads. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a productive rest of your day. Bye, and I'll see you next time.